Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your host for the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. Oh, yeah. Welcome back, everybody, to A Little Less Fear podcast, and Happy New Year, everybody. Love you all so much. And guess what? I've got an incredible human being right in front of me. Her name is Bridget Owens. She's the creator of the Waxing Soul podcast, the Mantras and Affirmations coloring book series, and the Feminist Tarot. She has led a local pagan meetup for the past 10 years and is a writer, alchemist, and spiritual thinker. Her passion for authentic living comes from her own experience as a queer woman and urban atheist, witch in the Bible Belt. Growing up the child of an evangelical minister, her spiritual path has taken her through Catholicism to Neopaganism and ultimately showed her that spirituality is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. I know that as well. Welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast, Bridget.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. It's definitely a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to this. So, hey, Bridget, tell us your journey. What brought you to where you currently are today with all this incredible stuff going on in your life?
Wow. So my problem is always like, how far back do I go to start?
As far as you'd like. When you first thought that right now, what image came to your mind?
So I think it really comes from growing up a preacher's kid. And I really, for all of my childhood into my teen years, actually into college, I was really very I wasn't an unwilling participant in Christianity. I was committed because I really didn't know that there was any other way to be. I don't want to say I grew up sheltered, but I didn't have any examples in my life of people who didn't believe what my parents believed. And so, I mean, I was the church organist, and, I was very much into that. And then I moved out on my own after college. I graduated, and there was some sort of a little bit of broadening of my horizons in college, of course, because I traveled abroad and I met new people, and I was, sort of got a bit better view of what opportunities there were in the world for different ways of thinking. But I moved out on my own, and like literally 9 hours away, didn't know anybody at all, and found that the prospect of going to church, finding a church that was like the ones that I'm sorry. I need to.
So then at the time you were still going to church even through your
So I moved to Chicago, and my parents for the first few weeks after I was there, every time I'd talk on the phone, they were like, so have you found a church? Have you found a church? Have you found a church? And I was like, no, not yet. And they had suggestions like, you should go here, or you should try, like, we know people in these places. And every time I thought about it, I was like, it was one thing to be part of the church, like part of the preacher's family and in it and all of that. I don't want to be on the other side. Like, I guess I'm not that committed to it. Like, this is not what I really want. And I thought back to being in Europe, and I thought, well, I had all these amazing spiritual like experiences being in like cathedrals and monasteries and these like sites that are just rich with history. And I was like, maybe Catholicism, maybe it's the pomp and circumstance. Maybe I want that. Mm-hmm. So I started just kind of going to mass. And that felt better. Like, that felt more me. So I converted, and that felt pretty good for a while. And I kind of like praying the rosary turned me on to meditation, and that was good while I was living on my own in Chicago. And somewhere along the way, I picked up a book that about feng shui, just randomly off a shelf at Urban Outfitters. And
what is feng shui?
So feng shui is it's a Chinese.
How do you spell it? Fungshui?
Yeah, Feng.
Okay.
And it simply put, the concept is that the way that you arrange your space, there are sort of the place where you live is part of kind of your, I don't know if they would call it magic, but it splits your house into zones that are related to different areas of your life, and there are things that should and shouldn't go in each, and it's about the flow of energy in your home, and that if you do the right things for the flow of energy in your home, you can kind of have that will have effects on the rest of your life. So it was my first sort of introduction to kind of the core principles of magic. And I don't know why I picked up the book. I don't know why that was something that I wanted to try out. But I kind of started dabbling in that. And then my kind of professional life, my undergraduate degree is in architecture. It was something that I decided in junior high that that's what I wanted to be. And I had moved to Chicago to work in a firm, and I got fired from my first professional job after 3 years. And kind of had to really do some thinking about myself and what I wanted out of life and how things had, progressed to that point, and had I made wrong choices, and kind of rethinking my whole outlook on who I was and what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I ended up I decided I wasn't going to be an architect anymore. I was just going to be an artist. And that meant I had to move home. And this time when I moved back home with the family, then I didn't feel like going to mass anymore. And I didn't want to go to church. And I was like, none of this is fulfilling to me anymore. I tried a little bit. And by that time I had been talking to, I had gotten into made some friends online. And one of the friends that I made online, we'd been chatting for like 3 years at this point. And that developed into a relationship. So with this woman who is now my wife. And she moved to be near me, and so that, we could have our relationship. And I knew that she was sort of interested in Wicca and witchcraft. And so a coworker just one day out of the blue mentioned that there was a pagan meetup in our area. Okay. And I thought, well, this is a great way for my wife to make friends. She doesn't know anybody here. Like, I can take her to this meetup. So we started going, and that was kind of the beginning for me of this journey of kind of getting into neo-pagan ideas and magical ideas, and really kind of throwing the door open to a lot of this spiritual stuff that I just hadn't ever had access to. And around that time, I also started my own business, and thought I was like really on this path to like, everything's gonna click in my life now. Like this is I'm gonna be an artist, and I'm gonna have my own gallery, and I've got this new spiritual thing, and I've got my girlfriend living near me, and like this is all great. And I just ran up on like financially, the business didn't do well. There was, natural stuff, like we had a big ice storm, and we had the recession, and we had everything kind of started falling apart. And because I had started reading tarot, and I had started kind of doing self-work and meditating and all of this stuff, instead of falling back to kind of what my parents would have said of like, you need to turn it over to God, I was like, I need to figure out like, what is it in me? What is it about the way I have lived my life that like I got fired from my first job, and like this business is, just self-destructing, and like all of this stuff is falling apart, even when it should, like, there's no reason for it to on the outside, so it has to be inside.
That's a good way to look at it, Bridget. There's no reason for it to on the outside, so you're looking in now. You're not blaming your outside circumstance. You're trying to basically figure out what needs to come into alignment within you in order for everything else on the outside to come into alignment. That's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, and there was, so part of, this is the part of the story that I always kind of, people either understand or don't. I, out of the blue, just the way things are, I started listening to 9 Inch Nails in like 2006.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just hit something emotionally that was like, that's just resonated in the way that it needed to. And when I get into something, I get super into it. I was like, I need to know everything about Trent Reznor and the whole history. Like, I just need to know everything. So I was reading interviews and I was going on, websites, and I was doing all that. And I read an interview with Trent Reznor where he was talking about his own, personal journey. And even though I'm like, I've never been an addict, I've never been an alcoholic, I've never been a famous rock star, I've never gone through all this stuff, but the way he was describing the reasons that he's, fallen into these self-destructive patterns, I was like, that is exactly how I have felt. Exactly. And it was all of this about, sort of imposter syndrome stuff and not feeling like, I belonged places and trying to compensate for things. And that sort of tripped off this journey of, I spent for probably 3 months just listening to Nine Inch Nails every day, and just every lyric would bring up memories, and I'd be like, oh, that's why I do this, and this is where that started, and this pattern, and all of this stuff. And that was my introduction the hard way to shadow work. Wow. and doing all of that, and between some therapy and my kind of magical practice, that has been the journey ever since. So for the past 10 years or so has been, no, longer than that. Holy crap, it's 2023. Yeah. Doing math on that. So the past 16, 17 years has been not just doing my own work, but kind of learning about those processes of shadow work and the spiritual, techniques and methodologies that, and how they work, and why they, when to use them, and how I can kind of heal myself of a lot of the things from my childhood that I didn't know at the time were trauma. Yeah. I always said I had a really great childhood, that my upbringing was smooth and didn't have any sort of horrible things in it, but there's stuff that I now understand to be trauma and things to work through, and doing all that has freed me up to kind of really dig deep into the spiritual stuff that I talk about now. So,
Bridget, you mentioned two really strong words, and I'm pretty certain that some listeners might not be familiar with what paganism is and how you define magic. Can we start with paganism and then talk about magic?
Yeah. So paganism is it's a very broad term these days, that kind of people throw on anything that's not mainstream religion. So, everything from, sort of old folk magic, like Germanic folk magic and Norse paganism, and going back to these old, not organized religions, sort of the folk traditions. Okay. Of our forebears. And it also, some people apply it to things like Buddhism and some of the, Asian religions and that kind of thing. But in sort of the root of the word, it technically speaking is kind of the religion of the country folk from from the past. So it's the folk traditions, the ancestor traditions, that kind of stuff. Oh, nice. And a lot of that is being sort of revived, and sort of there's the Neopagan movement, which is trying to kind of bring those traditions into the modern world. So that's where you get Wicca.
So and that's what the word neo means, because it's kind of new, the new aged version of. Okay, got it. So new age version of folk traditional, ancestral traditional type spirituality.
Yeah. So a lot of the major things that you'll find, if you kind of run in pagan circles, a lot of people follow Norse traditions, Celtic traditions, trying to get back to sort of Druidry and Viking religion and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. And so thank you for that. So let's talk about magic. How do you define magic? Because I feel that it might be defined differently than how some listeners might be viewing it.
Yeah, and that's and I even kind of view it maybe a little bit different than a lot of magical practitioners, because technically I'm still sort of an atheist. I don't actually believe that there's anything technically supernatural out there in the universe, because everything, if we had the knowledge of all of the workings of the universe, it would all make sense in a scientific way, but we are just not that advanced.
It would all be natural and not necessarily supernatural.
Yeah. So if there are entities and energies out there that we don't understand, they're not like, it's not God. It's just a different kind of, it's another species out there or whatever, but it's scientific. We just,
sure, totally.
yeah.
I can see that.
But I define magic is basically us tapping into that unknown in a way that we know works, but we don't know why. So I think of it as there's this kind of veil or border between the reality we understand and everything that we don't. And we're sort of in the scientific realm, sort of in material reality. If I want something to happen, I go like, I want to move that table. I'm going to go over and I'm going to pick the table up and I'm going to put it where I need it to be. And that's just like, I understand everything that happened there.
Yeah.
And I physically went over and did it. I did. I was responsible for all of the things that occurred to make that happen. And magic is more when we go, well, I want the table to move. I'm going to put a request. I'm going to put energy. I'm going to put something in motion that happens behind that veil. I don't know what happens there, but through trial and error, I know if I do these things, somebody's going to come along and move that table for me. Yeah. I didn't have to go ask them. I didn't say that's how I needed it done. I said, I need the table moved. And I don't need to know. I can't, there's no way at this point where it's inconsequential what happened behind that veil. Sure. I just know that when I do this, that thing happens. So a lot of it is applied psychology, I think. A lot of it is sort of perceptual. I tread definitely in that kind of zone of, just because I know that there will be listeners that go, magic's not real. It's this, all of these coincidences. Yeah, it also doesn't mean that that's not real.
Right, exactly.
The coincidences are powerful too.
Oh yeah.
So, but it's doing those practices that are kind of the cause and effect. The cause and the effect are completely disconnected, but you trust that it's going to happen anyway.
Yes, you trust that the unseen forces will make it happen, just through mental alignment.
Yeah.
And I also noticed you spell magic different. You spell it Magick. Is that because you're kind of doing away with the MGIC, which is like magic tricks type thing that somebody would do a show with?
Yeah, I don't consistently do it. And it kind of depends on, there's some people like the different spelling and some don't. I guess there's controversy there. I don't know. Sure. But it is a way to, I also, when I was in college or in high school, I dated a guy that was an illusionist. I've seen, like there's a difference between,
right.
Yeah. David Copperfield and
which is still fun to watch and stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to the Feng Shui, did I say that correct?
Feng Shui.
Feng Shui. Oh my goodness, I did not say that correct. So going back to Feng Shui and making your living space kind of more of your magical freedom, can you dive in a little deeper with that?
Yeah, and I will say I'm not an expert.
Sure. How do you understand it?
I got this one book and sort of operated from it, but the idea is, and this is an ancient Chinese practice. You can hire Feng Shui experts who will come and read your home out and tell you what needs to change. But the idea is that you want the I think it's qi to flow properly in your home. And that's a reflection, like that sort of magically impacts your life. And it takes your home and it grids it into a 3x3 grid based on directions and where your door is, and kind of depends on, that's what the expert comes in and does. Or like you can find books that'll tell you how to do that. And each zone kind of it corresponds to an area of your life. So there's a zone for like family, and there's a zone for prosperity, and there's a zone for like love and relationships, and there's one for like travel and helpful people and career. And so, and it then corresponds to all of the 5 elements in sort of Chinese magic, and different colors and associations and materials. So it will say, like, if you're struggling with something in your job, and you can kind of look at that corner of your house and go, oh, this thing shouldn't be there. I should put this type of object. I need a chime that looks like this, or something that's made of this material, and I need to not have this. And there's all of these little remedies. It's basically how magic works. You go,
Yeah.
I'm going to put this little box with this stuff in it. I'm going to write a note that this is what my intention is, and I'm going to put this plant there, and I'm going to take this out of the corner, and that's going to sort of realign the energy in that corner, which is going to realign the energy in my life around that topic.
So everything is organized intentionally. That
Yeah.
makes sense. That's awesome.
And it
reorganizing
and it works. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can imagine it works, definitely.
Yeah.
And so you tried this yourself?
Yeah. So and it also works on a principle of, like, you have to tidy your space up too. Like, if your house is a mess, then that's a lot of problem.
Declutter.
Yeah. So that's kind of the first thing I started kind of experimenting with. And I think part of it was just me wanting to know if this crazy idea even worked. And also then I think it also helped my sort of spiritual outlook and the way I kind of view my life and things, because it forces you to go, these are this is the thing that's going wrong, or this is the thing that I don't like that's happening in my life. And where on the grid does this go? Like, what are the elements that are needing to be realigned, instead of just going like, well, this all sucks, somebody please help me fix it. To go, okay, this is part career, and this is also maybe part of a family issue, so I need to break this down, and what is it exactly that's going on, and having that increased awareness of the dynamics of things in your life makes it easier to kind of pinpoint where to put your attention.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Hey Bridget, there's an awesome question I saw on your page here online, and I'm wondering if you could answer this for us. How do we become more authentic in our spirituality?
That's the big one. So that's the kind of the big lesson that I've learned along the way, because I know that there's I have a podcast as well. I talk to a lot of spiritual people, and there's a lot of, here's the thing that's going to fix it for everybody. Here's this benefit that everybody's going to get out of this methodology or this path or this belief system or whatever. And I tried a lot of things. Like I grew up Protestant. I became Catholic. I tried Wicca on for a little while. I kind of followed these sort of preset paths, and nothing quite did what there were bits of and pieces of all of it that felt beneficial, that was good for me at one point in time, and then I would sort of lose interest in it, or it would stop working, or whatever, stop being applicable. And along the way, I realized that, first of all, like, I didn't just taking somebody else's word for, like, this is how things are, and this is how you can believe, and this is how you can do this methodology and meditate in this way, or this'll fix everything. For me, that wasn't enough. And I wanted to know, especially considering that I'm sort of technically an atheist, I don't think that there's a God out there going, this is what I want everybody to do. Sure. This is the rules I've laid down. I was like, why is it that I'm even chasing spirituality if I don't think that there's a force in the universe telling me I need to?
That's a good question to ask.
So I sat down to do a research project. I was like, I'm going to go back to as far back as I can go in the research, Paleolithic humans, and figure out, not just take flawed research, because I know a lot of archaeology and anthropology, early
Yeah.
Anthropologists especially were missionaries. They had, agendas and biases of their own that hasn't probably been fixed in the popular, scientists tend to stay up to date on things as this knowledge gets updated, but we don't. And I was like, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to start reading like research papers and stuff and look at it. And where did we start as humans having spirituality? Where does it even come from?
Sure.
And as I started doing this is a project that is still kind of ongoing. But as I started going through very early humans, what hit me over and over and over again was like, we have our most ancient ancestors were far more advanced than we have been taught that they were.
Absolutely.
And logical.
Oh, yeah.
And this idea that like, well, they must have like, we invented, religion because we're scared of death and we were scared of nature and we were overwhelmed by all of this. Like, no, they were masters of following, like, they were nature. They were out chasing herds of, animals. Right. They had to understand nature to be able to exist in it. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make any sense. So where does it come from? And again and again and again, I don't have a good answer for that necessarily, but sure. In realizing that we needed to sort of rethink what our ancient ancestors were capable of and how they saw the world, it was like that I kind of need to rethink my kind of core idea of what am I capable of?
Yeah.
Like, what do I need? What is the purpose of spirituality? What do I get out of it? And so this book that I have, that I published about a year ago has sort of been that's where that has come out of. And sort of a process of kind of stripping things back and going through a process of asking, like, these beliefs that I have, this worldview that I have, where did it come from? Is it the one that, like, am I laboring under ideas that somebody else has told me, like, no, you need this, or you're not capable of this, or this is who you're supposed to be? And actually getting down to the core of what each of us not just believes about the universe and our place in it, but what we need on a spiritual level. Because spirituality isn't about believing the right things, right, or doing the right things. It's seeking out things that we need on a spiritual level. It's our needs, our emotional, spiritual, psychological, community needs. It's the connections we need to make. Right. So, and each of us are going to come to that with different needs and different, being in a different place. Like, we're all individuals. And so there is no one path or one belief system or one doctrine that is going to help everyone. Exactly. And benefit everyone. And we don't know what we need until you get down into the core of who you are.
I love that. So then I figure you found out what you needed, or are you still on that search?
I think it is always changing. I have all sorts of, like, I track the numerology of my years, and, I sort of recognize that there are cyclical patterns in my life, and that, things ebb and flow, and there isn't ever going to be a point in my life where I go, well, I healed all my stuff and sure. I am in this perfect place and we're done.
Right. We're done, right?
Evolution is personal evolution is is never ending.
Evolving.
Yeah. Every time, like, I can kind of find in the moment what I need, and that means that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and need something else.
So being authentic and becoming more authentic to, so in order to become more authentic in your spirituality, you need to find your core values. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Find out your core values, meaning find out what's most authentic to your own being.
Yeah. And I think about it this way. So, they say when they call it the overview effect, when astronauts go into space and see Earth from orbit, and it, like, changes their entire perspective of, like, it sort of renders all of this, sort of petty human stuff that we do on the surface, like, right, puts it all in perspective, because we're all living on this little tiny marble floating in the vastness of space and all of that. And I think that that's what spirituality often tries to get us to do, which is not bad. It's good to kind of put all of this stuff that we are dealing with in perspective.
Yes.
But when they come back to Earth, they still have to, like, you can be floating in space and looking at Earth and going, oh, all these boundaries and politics and all of that, this is irrelevant, this is stupid. But when you come back down, you can't just like shred your passport and say, well, this doesn't matter.
Right.
Spirituality tends to give us that like bigger view sometimes, but as individuals, there's still the reality of our lives. There's still the reality of, this is where I live, this is where I come from, this is the situation that I'm in, these are the things that I'm dealing with, this is the body that I'm in, this is the, like all of that stuff. And there's got to sort of be a balance. So understanding where you are, like, these are the things that are important to me, this is the struggles that I'm having, this is the support that I need on a spiritual level. And then also being able to kind of back out and go, and in a broader sense, I know that this isn't everybody. I am, there are larger concepts, and I can, like, specifically, I don't need to it doesn't work to go, this is what I need, this is what spirituality means to me, this is what this needs to mean to everybody, this is the one true answer.
Yeah. And
to recognize that it's an individual path that you're walking, that other people are going to join you on here and there and come in and out of that path, but that all of the tools that we get from spiritual paths are just tools. Exactly. We are, in another 1,000 years, all of this spiritual ideas that we have now probably won't even exist anymore. And to have that kind of perspective on things. What I go through in my book is that it's a process. Building an authentic spiritual path, practice starts with sort of the knowledge of self, and doing that, shadow work, and getting into, who you are and what your worldview is, and how this plays out in your life, and all of the, effects that it has on your career, and all of these things, to get in touch with that. And then go through a process of learning how to, when you figure out who you are, and strip away the stuff that you've sort of been putting on because you felt like society told you needed to, or that this wasn't acceptable. Because that's a hard process. That was
it's a very difficult process.
The process of going through and going, I've been taught that this is what I should believe, but deep down, I know I don't. And that's hard. And then going through the process of, here's how I'm going to, even if nobody else knows that I'm going through this process, here's how to embody who I know that I am now, rather than trying to shape myself into what everybody else is trying to make me be. And it is a little like the process of coming out for those of us in the LGBT community, kind of figuring out, like, how do I embody who I know I am?
That's an excellent question.
Even when that means I'm breaking the rules of, the people are trying to impose upon me. And so that's kind of like phase 2. And then once you've sort of figured out who you are, how to live as you are, then there's like a third phase of evolving, like changing the people around you, like setting your life up to not just facilitate who you are, but to encourage you to continue to evolve as yourself, instead of continuing to try to conform to, whatever standards, to like set yourself to build that path in front of you.
So Bridget, once you start to embody who you know you are, then is that when you can ask spirit, I guess the spirit world, what is the support that I need on a spiritual level?
I think that starts. I love that
question, by the way.
Yeah, I think that starts kind of from the beginning.
Okay.
So for instance, one of the things that I discovered about myself early on, in my whole 9 Inch Nails phase, was that I had never, my upbringing didn't allow for negative emotions. I didn't know how to deal with them. So frustration, anger, self-hatred, any of that stuff. I mean, those are all legitimate emotions that we have. Like, emotions mean that they serve a purpose.
Absolutely.
And, you know, even like grief, like I grew up in the you just give it to God and he'll deal with it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I realized that part of what had led me to this frustrating life where I felt like things, even when technically on paper everything should be fine, they were falling apart. It was because I didn't know how to confront shame or fear or any of those things. I didn't know how to deal with so-called negative emotions. And that was the kind of support that I knew I needed. Like, I needed to be taught that as an adult now.
Yeah.
And on it, I feel like that's sort of the first thing I turned to spirituality for. It was what tools can I find? What supports can I find in, you know, whether it's community or if it's energetic or it's spirit or it's just this, you know, methodology to help me figure out how to deal with these things that I have to, like, I can't connect to people if I don't. This is
Right.
like, this has isolated me. This has made me afraid to do things that I know I need to do because I don't know how they're going to turn out and I don't know how to deal with that.
Sure,
Like, that's
sure.
and living on faith is not who I authentically am. That's not part of how I exist in the world. I can have faith in me, but I'm not real good at going like, well, this supernatural force is just going to catch me.
Sure.
So that's, I think we kind of, as we're doing our shadow work, we're just going to stumble on those things of like, well, this is something that I don't know how to do, or this is something I struggle with. This is clearly something I need spirituality to kind of step in. I need something to fill this purpose, fill this void for me.
I love that. Thanks, Bridget. Bridget, tell us about your book. What's the title of it?
It's called Deep Self Magic. It's a step-by-step roadmap to spiritual authenticity. So it's laid out in a step-by-step. Every chapter is a step, and it takes you from like the concept of shadow work through the 3 phases. And then the last chapter is kind of how to, once you've gone through that, if you really want to put together something that feels and looks more like traditional spiritual practice, kind of how to piece that together for yourself.
I love that. That's awesome. Sounds like really helpful, actually. Super helpful.
Yeah, and it's basically been kind of it's the roadmap that I went through, and I'm realizing now that it's even for those in the kind of neurodivergent community, especially, I've realized in the last year that I'm autistic. It's an unmasking journey. It's kind of a guide. It's my process that I went through of not just figuring out who I am, but going, this is different than I have been taught to be, and this is how I'm able to, like, I need to build a life where I can be who I am and not feel ashamed of that. So all of the forces that are going to make me feel bad for that, they're gone. I'm going to build a life around me
that's not going to be
those
helpful
are,
for
yeah.
you ever.
Yeah.
Awesome, Bridget. Bridget, tell us about your podcast.
And the podcast is called The Waxing Soul, sorry. And I do 2 kinds of episodes. Some are just me kind of talking about deeply nuanced takes on sort of spiritual ideas, especially magical practice. So down to, you know, what is magic and where does it come from and all of that stuff. And then I also have guests on who talk about their own journey of finding authentic spirituality.
That's incredible. I love it. I love it. Bridget, how can our viewers or watchers and listeners find your book and find your podcast?
The book is on Amazon, but it's also you can go to bridgetowens.com, and all of my stuff's on there, all of the things that I do. So it's kind of your one-stop shop for all of my projects.
Place to shop.
Yeah.
Bridget Owens, everybody. Bridget, I have one more question for you. If you can go back to a time in your life, your darkest days, knowing what you know now, what would you tell Bridget back then? There's a time machine and you're going back right now.
Wow. Yeah. I think I would go back. And it's interesting that you say that. Because I have been in the last month or two doing this project of going back through my life and looking at numerologically, we go through 9-year cycles. And I've been going back and looking at those cycles and how they played out in the past. And so I've been kind of digging into my childhood memories and putting myself back in the shoes of who I was when I was younger. And I think I would just go back to like my preteen, my teenage self, and just tell her that the world is so much bigger than what she knows. That there is so much more out there than the stuff that kind of preoccupied my concerns at the time.
That's awesome, Bridget. Thanks so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. I look forward to keeping in touch with you. Do you have social media handles? Are you on Instagram? Are you on TikTok?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and actually I spend most of my time on TikTok. All of my handles are, it's Bridget Owens Magic, just with a C, not with the K.
Okay.
But, all of my handles are Bridget Owens Magic.
Bridget Owens, Magic.
Yeah.
Bridget
So I'm
Owens,
on
everybody.
Facebook and Instagram and TikTok.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bridget, for being on A Little Less Fear podcast and for sharing your incredible journey and all of this information on spirituality. You're definitely, I can't wait to take a second look at how I have everything placed in my room and my living room and start the feng shui.
Yes.
Start changing the feng shuis to meet my, I guess, what's the right word? Meet my spiritual needs, or
yeah.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Bridget. Happy New Year to you and all your loved ones, and we're definitely keeping in touch. I appreciate your connection.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to A Little Less Fear podcast. You know, I keep going because of all of you, all of the viewers, the supporters, the listeners, the followers, the subscribers, the feedback, the comments that I get. I'm just really grateful to be where I'm at and to be able to bring all these people here on this platform to motivate the world. It motivates me to keep going. It motivates me. It lights me up to keep going and going and going. And because of that, my website's also going strong. I've created an incredible resource page for all kinds of people. Anybody needing support of any kind, please check out my website at www.alittlelessfear.com. And I've also launched freelance poetry for businesses, for marketing, for people that need something creative. Check it out. It's fun. There's video poetry. It's visual poetry. And if you have any other questions for me, you can also email me at littlelessfear@gmail.com. Thank you so much, everybody. I love you all, and just a million thanks.